Well, hey, we're continuing in a series that we've been calling Counting Sheep. And when we say counting sheep, the whole goal, the premise behind it is this study, this look into Psalm 23, and this encouragement through David's words, and I think some really practical encouragement how we can find rest even in a restless world. And look, when I say rest, you need to know I'm talking about so much more than just sleep. In fact, there was actually an Oxford University study that was done some years ago where they actually put this whole idea of counting sheep when you go to sleep to the test. And so they had several groups. They had one group that they kind of studied as they were, they had them come in and get all comfortable and get their pillows and get ready for a good night's sleep. And they told the first group, they said, hey, we want you to just sort of imagine like waterfalls and peaceful streams. And they're like, all right, great, good, right? And then the next group was sort of the control group. They said, hey, you can, just think about whatever, right? Like whatever works for you to get to sleep. We'll just stand over you and watch you sleep, which that's not creepy at all, right? And then the third group, they challenged, hey, we want you to actually try to mentally count sheep and see how that goes. And so they ran this test. These three groups, they slept through the night, and when they got up, the interesting results that they found was that the first and second group did amazingly well on the test. Like the first group, they just thought of waterfalls. Like they actually kind of won the prize for getting to sleep the fastest and having the most restful sleep through the nights. The second group that just sort of did whatever they wanted to do, they came in, a close second, in terms of being able to get to sleep, getting a good night's rest. But the group that lagged way far behind, and struggled to get to sleep and was incredibly restless was the one that spent their time trying to count sheep. Like mentally, like trying to imagine these sheep jumping over fences, right? One sheep, two sheep, three sheep, right? And I think part of the reason it was such a struggle too is how unnatural that is. Like, when was the last time you drove down the road and you saw sheep jumping over fences, right? Like, hey, this is great, let's do it again. Like, you never see that. Here's what I get at is I think when we really read this psalm, this psalm that I think has so much kind of practical encouragement how to find rest, is you got to understand the rest that David's getting at, that he's talking about, is a rest that he found not by counting sheep, but by counting on God. Counting on God. As again, most scholars actually believe that when David actually wrote this psalm, it was later on in his life and reign as king of Israel. And it's important we get this because to really understand what he's trying to kind of get through to us, you got to understand what he's been through in his life. And so by the time he's like penning these words, like David's been through some things. And so he's reflecting on all that God has done and all that God has brought him through and carried him through in his life when he writes these words. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I'll fear no evil, because I know you're with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. So I love this. So you got to understand that for David, this confidence he had was more than theoretical. It was experiential. Let's be real, again, you don't have to be much of a theologian or, grown up in church to know that David went through some things in his life, right? Like from betrayal to rejection to disappointment to failure to loss, only to get to the end of it all. And looking back, discover that with God, what others might have seen as a recipe for disaster in his life were actually the table preparations for his development. Going on to say this, you prepare a table before me. In the presence of my enemies, you anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And again, it's important we start here because I think it's what sets the table to understanding where David is going with the psalm. But by one, first sort of reminding us and encouraging us with this is this understanding of who's at the head of the table. Who's at the head of the table in our lives? Look, anyone ever taken a personality test before in your life? Maybe for work or just for fun. I actually enjoy a lot of these tests, and partially because I feel like you get a different result depending on the day. Like if you're in a really good mood, you typically get good results out of some of these things. And so anyway, it was a couple weeks ago, I ran into a pastor friend of mine who kind of specializes in a lot of these personality tests in his counseling. And one of them in particular, he's a huge fan of the Enneagram. But he recently discovered a new test, and he was really excited about it. And so he's telling me about this. He's like, Seth, you got to try this. I'm telling you, it's incredibly revealing. And look, it doesn't take much time because you could tell I was trying to kind of walk it back, hey, I see somebody else over there. I'll be right back. It's like, no, I'm telling you, it only take 5 minutes. And I'm thinking, yeah, 5 minutes for a personality like yours, like a type A-driven personality, but mine. But anyway, he did spark my interest enough that I actually gave it a try. So a couple days later, I get into this, and I kid you not, 45 minutes later, I'm still working in this thing. I'm still overthinking, because I don't know if there's any test takers like me who tend to be overthinkers, right? Like every question is life or death. You just want to, if I get the wrong answer, it's going to give me the wrong results, and I'm going to turn into the wrong person, right? And so here I am. I'm agonizing over this test. This test, again, took him 5 minutes, and I'm still an hour into it. And yet, something fascinating happened. For the first time, when I got to the end of it, for the first time in my life, I found out exactly who I'm not. Who I'm not. See, the problem was that I had read the instructions wrong. So one, which was supposed to be yes, always, I thought that I was meant to be 5. So 5, so I got it totally backwards on the number. So I answered everything backwards. I answered everything in reverse. And as a result, I ended up finding out exactly who I'm not. And what's even more amazing is that in this person who I'm not, turns out that Seth is a really nice guy. He's fantastic. He's sweet, he's compassionate, he's charismatic, he's a great listener, he's uber organized. I'm like, that's the me I've always wanted to be. And I'm bringing this up because I think it might help to explain why David starts off Psalm 23 the way he does. Where I'm reflecting on all that God has brought him through in his life, goes on to say, the Lord is my shepherd. Now, think about this. What's the implication here with this? If the Lord is our shepherd, what does that make us? Yeah, I know. And I get the pushback with this, right? I know what some of you are thinking, because this is what I think. Let's be honest, we don't live in an agrarian society or culture much anymore, but let's be real, even in a world like ours that we live in, to be called a sheep, how many know, isn't typically seen as a complimentary thing? No, what do we think of? When we think of sheep, we think of someone with something with a bad reputation. I know, terrible pastor joke, right? Not maybe the brightest, not maybe the smartest. These creatures who are constantly anxious and constantly worried and constantly fearful of everything in their life. No real defenses. Again, not the brightest, not the smartest. These creatures that have a tendency to be prone to wander, and specifically prone to wander into a lot of trouble. In fact, one of my favorite videos that kind of illustrates this is one I came across at YouTube a few years back, but take a look at this. Gotta wait for it to. The slow motion is the best part of this, I think. See, again, that's what makes, I think, David's words, so eye-opening and powerful. Because, again, sheep don't have a reputation for, again, being maybe the most discerning or smartest of creatures. And yet here's David starting it off by not just talking about who God is, but highlighting who we're not. And as a result, really shining a light on the goodness of our God. Like, think about this, like the message of the Lord is my shepherd. It's so powerful, I think, partially because it's so countercultural. In fact, the New York Times some years back had an article celebrating the life and accomplishments of Leonard Bernstein, long considered to be one of the most talented and successful musicians in American history. Where in the article, they referenced an interview that was once done with him in which they asked him, which instrument is the hardest for you to play? Now, that's a guy who's played them all, right? Like, he's seemingly an expert in all of them. And his answer was kind of astounding. When asked which instrument was the hardest to play, he simply responded, the second fiddle. Going on to add, I can get plenty of first violinists, but to find someone who can play the second fiddle with enthusiasm, that's near impossible. Which, again, is what makes the implications of what David is getting at so powerful. We're speaking into a world that's all about striving to be the GOAT, right? The greatest of all time, resting on our own laurels. David instead finds rest in understanding that it didn't all rest on him. In fact, I put on my notes this way. I think part of David's confidence, his ability to find rest in a restless world, is that he understood something we got to get, and that's it's only when I'm okay with who I'm not can I rest in who he is. It's only when I'm okay with who I'm not can I really rest in who he is. When I know that, hey, I was never called to do it all. I was never called for all of this to rest my life. Like when it comes to that situation in my job, when it comes to that situation in my relationships, like it doesn't all rest on me. And the good news is it was never meant to all rest on me. See, it's only when I'm okay with who I'm not can I begin to find rest in who he is. I wonder for so many of us, that's actually what the hindrance, what keeps so many of us from finding some freedom from the paralyzing anxiety and worry that many of us lose so much sleep day in and day out from, is if we're really honest, it's our own pride. As again, if you want to experience rest in a restless world, you got to know who's at the head of the table. And it was never meant to be you. It's never meant to just all rest on you. But also, and this is where we're going to spend the rest of our time unpacking today, I think what David was able to find rest from, even in a restless world, is this understanding that shepherds actually make the best sailors. Stick with me on this, but David, in talking about how this good shepherd guided him through even the worst times of his life, it goes on to say this in verse 2. He says, he leads me beside still waters. Now, the actual literal translation of this is he leads me beside waters of rest. And typically, let's be real, when we read this, I don't know about you, but I tend to think of these really peaceful settings, right? I think of a nice like mountain stream or mountain lake. It's just calm, it's quiet, it's beautiful, no distractions, no phones, right? No to-do lists. But the truth is, when David's saying he leads me beside still waters, I think what we're going to come to discover is he's not referencing so much a place as much as a person. As again, speaking of a sheep's skittishness and this fearful tendency in life is interesting enough. Do you realize that sheep are more likely to die of thirst than drink water from a fast-moving stream? Like that's how nervous they get. Like any type of noise or any type of chaos in the water. And so oftentimes a shepherd, in order to get a sheep to drink from a stream, would have to sometimes dam it up, upstream a little bit and find a way to sort of reroute some of the water where it would create this pool of still water, this calm water for the sheep to be able to drink from. See, what I'm trying to get us to see is that when David's talking about he leads me beside still waters, he's not talking about a peaceful place as much as he's talking about the Prince of Peace. And I think to really see this, to really get a glimpse into what this looks like, I think we got to fast forward to a story that we find in the New Testament, where Jesus seems to literally be counting sheep while the disciples are counting life rafts. And it's a story we touched on actually a little bit in the first part of our Mark series, but we find it in Mark chapter 4, where the disciples, they find themselves in a place where God leads them through these waters that are anything but still and anything but calm. Check this out. Starting in verse 35, it says, "That day when evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, 'Let us go over to the other side.' Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along. Just as he was in the boat, there were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern and sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, 'Teacher, don't you care?'" You ever ask that question? Don't you care? Don't you care what's going on? Now keep in mind, these are not like weekend fishermen. Like these are regular commercial fishermen. Like they've seen their fair share of bad weather and rough seas. So when it says they're fearing for their life, assuming they're going to drown, you can assume it was pretty bad. And to make matters worse, what's Jesus doing? He's sleeping. Like while they're counting down the time they have before the boat goes under, you got Jesus busy counting sheep. And mind you, he's not just sleeping, but Mark goes out of his way so you can really get a full glimpse into the frustration the disciples have by highlighting that he's not just sleeping, he's sleeping on a cushion. He's got his favorite pillow with him, right? And so while they're scared for their lives, like, "Lord, hey, you comfy there, right? Is everything good? Like, you like your little cushion? Because I don't know if you've noticed, but we're dying out here, right? Like, we're going under." Which begs the question, how can Jesus sleep in a moment like this? How could he sleep in a moment like this? Well, I have a bit of a theory on this, and you won't find it in a commentary or any of your study Bibles, and that is simply this. This is my theory. I can't help but wonder if this whole thing wasn't a setup. Like, and Jesus maybe in that moment, like wasn't like maybe like he was like fake sleeping, right? Fake sleeping. I know somebody like, can God do that? Can he act like that? He's sleeping when he's not. I don't know. I don't know what the rules are, but I do know this. I know that we've done that before in our lives. Remember, you're in church. You got to be honest, right? Have you ever fake slept? Kids come wanting something from you, and you're like, can't respond. I'm busy. I'm sleeping, right? Anyone here? No one. No room in the inn, right? Like I'm sleeping, you know. Or for me, this happens every Wednesday night when I finally settle down to go to sleep at night, only for Holly to walk in and go, "Hey, did you remember to take the garbage out?" I'm like, "Oh, what was that? Oh, sorry, I was asleep, right?" And, you know, even though moments ago I was just watching nonstop Ice Road Truckers. I don't know why that helps put me to sleep, but again, fake sleeping, right? And so getting back to the text, that's kind of what I imagine is going on here. Like, "Jesus, are you awake?" And he's like, trying not to giggle. "Yeah, I'm asleep." Probably had some drool for effect. And look, here's why I think this was just one big setup. Is because who's leading the trip? Who's the one who even told them to get in the boats and head on the Sea of Galilee to begin with? In fact, interesting enough, in the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and synoptic is just simply a fancy way of saying seeing together, or having a common view. This is why John's account is not considered a synoptic gospel, because while John covers some of the same accounts from Jesus' life and ministry, John actually is writing to a different audience with a different purpose. But Matthew, Mark, and Luke, There's a familiar thread, and there's a timeline often throughout, and yet even in saying that, it's pretty rare that they would all record the same story and same accounts in the gospel accounts. Oftentimes they would highlight or pick up a little bit different things from Jesus' life and ministry through their accounts, but not this one. Which by the way kind of goes to show you just what a traumatic event this was, that they would all three record this. Hey, I wrote that story in there too. You got that story? Jesus, I wrote you, I remember the PTSD I'm still dealing with from that storm and from the chaos, right? And so all three of them, they write it down, and not only do they write it down, they all write it down, interesting enough, the same way. Specifically pointing out that Jesus was the one who was leading this expedition. As Matthew says it this way, Matthew 8, verse 23, said, "Then Jesus got into the boat and his disciples followed him." Who's leading this? Jesus is. And so to be clear, Jesus is leading the way only to lead them right into a storm. Now here's where this can kind of lead to some theological wrestling matches within us. Can Jesus predict the weather? I know some of you are a little skeptical because of our own weather forecasters, right? But yes, he can do all things, he created weather. So yes, safe to say he could predict the weather. Which again is where I say the wrestling match comes into play. It's well, if he knew a storm was coming, why would he lead the disciples into and through a storm? Because I thought his job was to keep me safe, right? I thought it was to keep me comfortable. I thought it was to keep me away from rough seas and problems and hard times. I thought God was supposed to be kind of like Superman. You remember Superman, back when the Superman movies were good, like the originals, right? And where something bad happened and he missed it the first time around, what would he do? He would start flying backwards. He'd turn around, fly the other way he came, and he'd go so fast it would turn the time backward. It'd actually literally spin the earth the other way. And he'd go back and kind of fix and repair what was broken or what he missed. And I'll be honest, I think a lot of us sometimes, that's kind of how we see God. It's man, when I think of some of the brokenness, I'm God, I know you're God. Can't you do what Superman did? When I think of the hurt, when I think of some of the things I went through that I never wanted to go through, can't you go back and kind of repair that? Kind of again, if Superman can do it, find a booth, put some tights on, let's do this, right? But listen, I think this, if you hope to ever be able to really lean on God and trust in God as your good shepherd, I think it's going to take some of us understanding that the Bible also describes God as a good father as well. Any fathers in the house? Grandfathers? Yeah. Listen, I don't know about you, but I've discovered as a father over time, I think initially, when Austin was born, I thought my number one job was to always keep him safe. to keep him from all harm, to keep him from all discomfort, right? All challenges, all difficulties, all heartbreak and heartache. Only to discover, he's only 15 now, and he's already been through some things. There's times where he's tripped and fallen. There's times where he's had scrapes and bruises and broken hearts. In fact, he just started a track, and in his defense, he's only had a couple practices before his first track meet, but he had a track meet on Thursday, and one of the events he does is high jump. And so after he got done with the event, I was messaging him. I said, well, how did it go? Right? And he's like, great, I cleared the bar. But in the process, he continues on the text. He goes, I cleared the bar, but unfortunately, I missed the mat. He literally goes over the mat, and he's sore, and he's hurting from all that. And again, look, I share, like, what I'm trying to get to see is that if my job as a dad were to simply like keep my kid from all pain and all hard times and all difficulty, like I'd be a pretty bad dad, a pretty neglectful father. But listen, the reason I'm still listed as number one on the dad rankings in my son's eyes, with the number one dad coffee mug to prove it, right? Is because he knows that as a father, that's not my job. My job is not to keep bad things from happening to him all the time. That's his mom's job, right? Like, be careful, honey, it's okay. They just coughed, right? Like, it's not tuberculosis, don't worry, like, it's gonna be okay. Like, my job is not to keep him from hard times, but to be there for him when times are hard. Because here's the thing, as again, I don't know about your kids, but my kids seem to have been born with this condition called free will. Anyone else's kids have that same rare condition? And so while I may want to choose everything that I think is best for him, how many know I can't? And in fact, I'm learning that I'm not sure I would always want to. As I think of the times Austin has maybe been tempted most to resent me, is the times where I've tried to probably most protect him. Any parents with me on this? Like the times I said, hey, you know what, because I fear for you, I'm worried for you. It's like I got to limit some of your freedom here. And what do you think his response in those moments typically is? That's right. You're so right, Dad. Father knows best. Absolutely no. He pushes back on it. He's like, what? like you're worrying about nothing, Dad. And here's why I bring this up is that I wonder how many of you have tried to put our Heavenly Father in a similar box. Where it's like if you let something bad happen to me, God, we begin to question if He cares for us. But if you don't give me my freedom, then we begin to question if He's there for us. If He has our best intentions for us in mind. And then when God doesn't work the way we think He should work or that what we think He should do, we get frustrated and disillusioned with faith because we're making terms for God that, catch this, He never agreed to. We're writing contracts He never signed. Only to be like, hey, what's up, God? What's with all these storms in my life? What's with this discomfort? What's with all these relationship issues? Like what's going on? This isn't what I thought the contract said, and only for God to be like, I never signed that. That's not who I am. That's not what I do. I didn't agree to your terms. That's not what I promised. I never promised you never go through any storms. In fact, if anything, God makes it pretty clear that in this life, storms will come. Going on to say, in this life, you will have trouble. How many of you are glad you came to church today? Good news, you're going to have trouble coming your way. In fact, this might help to explain why there's another storm account we read of later in the gospel accounts, where we find the disciples again in the middle of a storm, but this time, Jesus, rather than being in the boat with them, is actually walking on water at a distance from them. Because God wanted to leave no doubt that whether Jesus is with you or not, how many know storms are going to come? Storms are going to come in your life, and yet here's the good news. Here's actually the real promise for us as believers. And that's that, listen, Christians aren't exempt from storms. They're exempt from storms with no purpose. They're exempt from storms, no purpose. In fact, we see this, Romans 8:28 says, and we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him, who've been called according to His what? Purpose. Yeah. Or to put it another way, just because God doesn't cater to you, doesn't mean He doesn't care about you. Just because God doesn't cater to you, doesn't mean He's not still crazy about you. He cares, He just doesn't cater. And when I think back over all the years I've been following God, one thing I've learned about Him and increasingly learning about Him is that His ways are not always my ways. Anyone else learning this lesson? His plans are not always my plans. His timing is not always my timing. His thoughts are not always my thoughts. Like He's not a genie in a bottle. He doesn't always do exactly what I want Him to do the way and the time I want Him to do it in. And yet, the interesting thing about this is the more I come to this realization, the more freeing I find it. like the more freeing I find it that when I learn to look to him, that it's not all on me. But when I learn to trust in him, that's when things, I think, start to click, especially when it comes to finding rest in a restless world. That when you understand that he's God and you're not, there's something freeing about that. When we understand that it's I follow you, you don't follow me, there's something incredibly freeing about that. In fact, I put it in my notes this way, is that salvation happens when we put our faith in Jesus. But catch this, real life change happens when we choose to follow him. Look, getting back to this account of this storm, I think we need to look at something Matthew's version of the account records to really begin to see the purpose behind all this. Check this out. Matthew 8, verse 25 says, so the disciples went and woke him up and saying, Lord, save us. We're going to drown. And he replied, you of little faith, why are you so afraid? Oh, I don't know, Jesus, like maybe because we're going to die, right? Like, I mean, on the list of appropriate reasons, I think, to be scared, impending doom would probably be on the top of that list, right? And so they wake him up, and of course, Jesus gets up, he rebukes the wind and the waves, but here's what I want us to see, is that Jesus, before he rebukes the storm, what does he do? He rebukes the disciples first. Frustrated that even after all they've seen him do, and he's done a lot leading up to this point, all the ways he's come through for them time and time again, all the miracles they've seen him perform, the mission they knew he was on, that even after all that, the first thing they're ready to throw overboard is their faith. And so when Jesus wakes up, he wakes up and he's like, man, what is wrong with you guys? And not trying to put them down, but to actually speak some faith into them. In fact, going on and this kind of performing the miracle almost like it's a little bit of an afterthought. Like, oh yeah, let's shut the wind off and the waves off and let me deal with the real issue that's going on here. Like, I know you think that's the waves. I know you think it's the storm. I know you think that's the real issue. But I'm telling you, it's actually deeper than that. Because how many know, listen, to Jesus, the problem is rarely the problem. And yet to us, like, the problem is always the problem. The problem with the boss is always the problem. The problem with our finances is always the problem. The problem with the government and the IRS, that's always our problem. But to Jesus, the problem is rarely the problem. Because he can fix the problem in an instant. I mean, he did it right here in the storm, right? Shuts the wind and the waves off like it's nothing, like it's a light switch. But why he takes the time to really speak into their lives, to deal with the storm that's going on here first, is that for Jesus, his frustration, that the problem that he had was our reaction to the problem. As again, the promise God gives us is not that you'll never go through storms and rough seas in life. It's that you and I will never go through storms without a purpose, and that purpose isn't that we would just go through it, but that we would grow through it. In fact, it might help to explain why Jesus says, you of little faith. Notice he doesn't say you of no faith. Obviously, they had some faith. They were following Jesus to begin with, right? They trusted him to get them even to that point that they were at right now. But he says, you of little faith. Because how many know, listen, while our faith in Jesus, for all of us, it starts with little faith. How many know it's not meant to stay as little faith? Like the point and the purpose of storms in our life, again, isn't to crush you or destroy you. It's to grow you. It's to grow specifically this heart of faith, to grow you a little faith into a big faith in a big God. And look, that doesn't happen through calm, peaceful, tropical settings. That happens all through storms, and it happens through struggles, and it happens through difficulties. See, what I'm trying to get to see is storms don't mean he doesn't care. Storms just prove that he's in control. And that's what he's trying to get them to see when he says, you little faith. He's trying to grow faith in them, and not a faith in their circumstances, not a faith in their situation, not a faith in their ability to row harder, but their faith in who God is. That he's got this. He's in control of this. That his presence is bigger than their problems. It's bigger than their problems. As we wrap this up, there was a story I alluded to, in a series that we opened the year up with, on the origins of God is my co-pilot. Anyone ever heard that statement, seen the bumper sticker? Maybe some of you have the bumper sticker, like, God is my co-pilot. Well, interesting enough, I never got a chance to really share the backstory to this, but the actual statement, God is my co-pilot, it originated with a World War I pilot by the name of Riley Scott. And he was a famous, really kind of legendary pilot, was known for, just his incredible skills as a pilot. But he eventually got shot down and miraculously survives this horrific plane crash. And so he's on the mend, he's in the doctor's office, and the doctor's, asking him, like, man, how are you still alive? Right? Like, how are you still here? And he makes this interesting statement, and he's kind of talking about what him and the other doctors are about, we've been trying to figure out how you're still alive, like how you did this. You must have an amazing crew, an amazing co-pilot, and he's thinking to himself, he's like, no, it's just me. It was a solo plane, it's just me, I was just it. And the doctor, kind of looks at him and goes, yeah, exactly. You had an amazing co-pilot. That's the only way we can envision how you're here. And so he walks off, he leaves, and kind of leaves Riley Scott to his thoughts. And Riley Scott, he starts thinking about this and starts pondering this, and it hits him. Yeah, the reason I'm here is because I had an amazing co-pilot. And this statement kind of birthed out of that. It's like God is my co-pilot. And he goes on to actually write a book by that very same title. I encourage you to read it. It's a good read. But here's the thing, and that's a great statement, but how many know, I think over the years, some of the heart behind it has gone lost, right? Where, we've kind of settled with this mindset of, oh, God is my co-pilot. He's, so we'll come in on a weekend, it's like, and we might not say this, but we kind of operate our lives like this. And in fact, interesting enough, there's this question, significant question at the end of Mark 4, at the end of the storm, after God brings them out, they say, who is this that would make the waves and the wind grow calm? I love that. Who is this? And look, here's what I bring to say. If you really want to experience peace, the kind of peace that passes understanding, the kind of peace that David talks about in Psalm 23, the kind of peace that these disciples would come to find and experience from the presence of Jesus. Listen, for a lot of us, it starts with asking that question. Who's this? When you think of Jesus, who is Jesus to you? Is he just a good teacher? Some good advice, some good suggestions to take into your week? Is he a good guy, a good friend? Or is he who he says he is as our good God? He's not just somebody along for the ride. He's our Lord. He's our shepherd. He's our captain. And I'm just telling you, you're always going to struggle with anxiety, and you're always going to struggle with worry, and you're always going to struggle with the cares of this world, and you're always going to feel like you're going under. As long as you keep thinking that you're in more control than you really are, that you've got it all figured out more than you really do, that it all rests on you. When the truth is, you want to find rest in a restless world. It's when you understand that no, it was meant to rest on him. I'm meant to find my rest in him. And not in a perfect place, with a perfect situation at work, perfect situation at home, perfect situation with the kids. I find my peace in the very presence of God. I find my peace in this relationship with him, with this relationship with the Prince of Peace. And look, I'm telling you, it takes humility to enter into that kind of peace. Again, this daily surrendering to recognize, hey, listen, to be okay with who I'm not. And in the process, come to discover and be reminded who he is. That he's got this. He's got a handle on this. That my peace is found in him. Look, I want to pray for you today. And again, I don't know maybe what's the storms and the waves that are going on in your life, but safe to say, in all of our lives, storms are inevitable. They're going to happen. And the question is maybe, just maybe, when it comes to that anxiety and comes to that fear and comes to that worry that you're dealing with, could it be that you've lost sight of who's in it with you? that you've lost sight, that somewhere along the way that you thought it was your responsibility to try to just row harder or try to navigate better. And could it be that God brought you here to remind you, no. Listen, it doesn't all rest on you. And if you learn to be okay with who you're not, just watch how I'll reveal who I am. The one who calms the waves and calms the sea, not just out there, but even in here. Even in your heart and even in your soul and even in your life. And so Jesus, right now, we just surrender it to you. We look to you not just as our Savior, but as our Lord, as our good shepherd, our good captain, our good God. It's God, we give it all over to you. We exchange the worry and the fear for this peace that passes understanding that's found only in you. In Jesus' name, amen and amen.